They said you just answer phones at the courthouse." Vanessa's voice rang out like a toast, light and sharp, her diamond ring catching the candlelight. Everyone laughed, especially her fiancé, Ethan Bellamy. I smiled, because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd seen Ethan before. Not at brunch, not at a wedding, in my courtroom. Because I'm not a secretary, I'm not a clerk. I'm Judge Claire Whitmore, the youngest ever appointed in our district. And tonight, at my sister's engagement party, her perfect narrative was about to unravel, starting with the look on Ethan's face. Growing up in the Whitmore household meant learning to take up less space. Our family photos told the story better than words ever could. Vanessa front and center, beaming in every shot. Me somewhere near the edge, one shoulder half out of frame. My mother, Elaine, always said I was easy, the kind of child you didn't have to worry about. Quiet, polite, predictable. I never threw tantrums, never craved attention. I was the daughter who didn't interrupt the room, and that's exactly how they treated me. Like background noise that could be tuned out when it wasn't convenient. Vanessa, on the other hand, was a force. Everything she touched sparkled. Homecoming queen, honor student, debate captain. She walked through the world like it owed her applause. My father, Robert, used to say that girl's got presence. Every time she entered a room, for me, I got, "Claire's dependable." That was the word they loved using. Dependable. Not brilliant, not bold, just, well, be enough to lean on and easy to forget. In high school, I learned to stop raising my hand unless I was called on. My counselor said I had the highest writing scores in the district. My mom asked if I could help Vanessa polish her college essay. When Vanessa got into NYU on early admission, they threw a dinner party. When I got accepted to Columbia on full scholarship, Dad blinked and said, "That's the one in New York too, right?" No one ever meant to be cruel. That's the thing about erasure. It doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it's the silence between what they say and what they don't. The compliments they never think to give. The questions they never ask. I spent most of my 20s quietly collecting degrees. Political science, law, public ethics. I clerked for the state court while working night shifts to pay rent. I never asked for help. They never offered. Vanessa would call now and then, not to ask about me, but to update me on herself. "I'm leading a campaign for a Fortune 500 company," she'd say. "Mom said you're doing that legal assistant thing?" That legal assistant thing. I never corrected her. I just swallowed the weight like I always had. Back then, I told myself it didn't matter, but deep down, I wanted someone, anyone, to ask what I was becoming. At every family gathering, Vanessa was the star of the show. Thanksgiving meant she carved the turkey, even though she didn't cook it. Christmas meant she handed out gifts, even though half of them were wrapped by Mom. She arrived late and still made the room pause when she walked in, heels clicking, coat draped just right, voice polished like a stage actress. My mother would beam, like royalty had entered. My father would refill her wine glass before she even asked. And me? I brought the wine. I helped clean the dishes while they toasted to Vanessa's latest client acquisition or public speaking award. I took the photos while she posed with the grandparents. Sometimes, I think they forgot I was even in the room, until it was time to take out the trash or drive someone home. Vanessa had always had a flair for drama. She told stories with her whole body, exaggerated just enough to keep everyone entertained. And the more she sparkled, the more invisible I became. It wasn't just that she was charming, it was that she knew it. She wielded charisma like a blade, slicing the air so sharply no one noticed the blood. The difference between us wasn't just how we were treated, it was what was expected. Vanessa was expected to succeed, to lead, to shine. I was expected to support. In our junior year of high school, we both expressed interest in law. I remember it so clearly, sitting at the dinner table, knees shaking with excitement, telling our parents I wanted to pursue pre-law. Vanessa laughed. "Claire, you hate confrontation." My dad chuckled. "She's got a point. Besides, Vanessa's already got the extracurriculars lined up for it." Mom just nodded. "Why don't you think about something steadier? Maybe court administration or research work. You're great with details. That night, I crossed law school off my dream list for the first time, but not forever, because there's something dangerous about being overlooked for too long. You stop seeking applause, but you start building something even stronger, resolve. They gave Vanessa the spotlight, and I took the shadows. They didn't know it then, but that quiet daughter they barely noticed, she was taking notes. It wasn't just the night they told me to consider something steadier. It was the application deadline 2 weeks later, when I found out Vanessa had submitted hers to every top-tier pre-law program. Columbia, Stanford, Georgetown. She hadn't told me. Not once. And when I asked her why, she just said, "There's only so much room at the top, Claire. You're better at behind the scenes anyway." I didn't argue. Because what do you say to someone who's already decided the world only has one spotlight, and it's hers? So I chose a different route, not because I wasn't capable, but because I was exhausted. Exhausted from having to explain why I deserved the same air she breathed so easily. I applied for a general political science program. Took a part-time job at the courthouse as a receptionist, answering phones, filing documents, running coffee to attorneys who never learned my name. But while they talked over me, I listened. I watched lawyers stumble through their arguments. I watched judges command rooms with nothing more than a pause and a stare. And most of all, I watched defendants. I watched the broken and the dangerous and the misunderstood walk through those doors, day after day. And I realized something. Power didn't come from being loud. It came from knowing exactly when to speak. I started reading old case files in the break room, bought used textbooks off eBay, took online night classes under a name no one in my family recognized. I studied when the building emptied out, when even the cleaning staff had gone home. And slowly, brick by brick, I built what they thought I'd given up. Vanessa thought I gave up law to make room for her, but what I did was build a foundation. Quietly, deliberately, out of sight. When I finally got accepted to law school, I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not Vanessa. I just packed up my things and moved into a one-bedroom sublet near campus with peeling paint and paper-thin walls. I spent 3 years studying harder than anyone else in the program, not because I needed to prove something to them, but because I needed to prove something to myself, that I wasn't invisible, that I wasn't a footnote, that just because I didn't take the same path didn't mean I wasn't going to arrive. And eventually, I did. Just not in the way they'd expect. My first job out of law school wasn't glamorous. I worked in the district attorney's office, buried in the domestic violence unit, overworked, underpaid, and assigned the cases no one wanted. Custody battles, restraining orders, files so heavy they felt like they carried the weight of every silent scream ever ignored. But I showed up every morning before sunrise, every evening long after the last courtroom cleared. I read every page, every footnote. I triple-checked timelines and cross-referenced affidavits. I built cases from scraps. Police statements on napkins, late-night voicemails, diary entries written in pencil. And slowly, something shifted. People started saying my name in meetings. Judges started requesting me by case. Survivors started hugging me in the hallway saying, "Thank you, you believed me." Still, I told no one. Not at home, not at holidays, not at the dinner table where Vanessa would recount her latest PR triumph like a TED Talk, while my parents nodded with pride and asked if I'd had time to explore admin leadership yet. They still thought I was some kind of court secretary, maybe a junior paralegal. It became a joke. "Claire's still keeping the files neat, right?" I'd smile, sip my wine, change the subject. Not because I was ashamed, but because I was tired of explaining worth to people who'd already decided mine. And the more I stayed silent, the more they filled in the blanks with whatever made them comfortable. My mom once told a family friend I handled clerical stuff for attorneys. I was 3 trials deep into prosecuting a serial offender at that point. I wasn't clerical. I was the reason he never saw daylight again. But I never corrected her, because part of me wondered what would it take for them to see me clearly. And the other part, it had stopped caring. My world was built on facts, not feelings, on evidence, not expectation. I had learned to fight without raising my voice, to win without stepping into the light. And if that meant my victories went uncelebrated, so be it. Because I wasn't chasing applause anymore. I was chasing justice. The case should have been simple. A pharmaceutical executive accused of falsifying safety data to fast-track a drug onto the market, one that left dozens of children hospitalized. The kind of case any prosecutor would want on their resume. The kind of case that made headlines. And I was lead counsel. I built that case like I built everything, brick by brick. Thousands of pages of internal memos, whistleblower statements, late-night depositions. It wasn't perfect, but it was solid. And I believed, deep in my bones, that we'd win. Then came the leak. A photo, just one, surfaced in a fringe tabloid. Vanessa and the defense attorney laughing together at a charity gala years ago. The headline twisted it cruelly. Sister of PR queen behind high-profile trial. Conflict of interest? It didn't matter that I hadn't spoken to Vanessa in weeks. It didn't matter that she had nothing to do with the case. The media latched on, hungry for drama. Suddenly, I wasn't a prosecutor. I was the sister. The narrative spiraled. Nepotism? Judicial misconduct? Should Claire Whitmore recuse herself? I was called into the DA's office. No one accused me outright, but the air was thick with unspoken doubts. Take a step back, they said. Let someone else lead. I didn't argue. I handed over the case file, walked out of the office, and didn't go back for 2 weeks. At home, I didn't turn on the TV, didn't read the papers. I watched the rain smear the city into watercolor silence. Vanessa called once, left a voicemail. "This isn't my fault, Claire. You should have seen it coming." I deleted it. The case eventually ended in a settlement, less than the victims deserved, and though my name was cleared internally, the damage had been done. They didn't fire me, they didn't demote me, but they stopped requesting me. I became invisible again, but this time, in the one place I thought I was finally seen, and for the first time in years, I questioned everything. Not because I believed I'd done wrong, but because I realized how fragile respect could be when built in silence. How easy it was to erase a woman who never insisted on being seen. 2 months after the fallout, I received a call from an unlisted number. "Claire Whitmore?" a voice said. "Yes." "This is Judge Marbury. Do you have a moment?" I stood frozen in my kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Judge Marbury wasn't just anyone. He was the longest-serving federal judge in our district, sharp as a scalpel, feared by lawyers on both sides of the aisle, and as far as I knew, completely unaware I existed. "I've been watching your work," he said. "That pharmaceutical case? You were boxed out." "I didn't handle it well," I admitted. "No," he replied, "but you handled it with integrity." There was a pause. "I'm retiring at the end of the quarter," he said, "and I've recommended your name for the shortlist." My mouth went dry. "For what?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "To replace me." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Not because I doubted myself, but because I'd spent so many years shrinking to fit into their version of me that I forgot how much space I could actually take up. "You've earned it," he said, like he could hear my hesitation. "But before you accept, there's something you should know." He took a breath. 2 years ago, your sister reached out to my clerk's office. She never mentioned your name directly, but she strongly suggested that someone from your circle was stirring up conflict in high-profile trials. She implied you were compromising the court's neutrality. Silence. "She tried to block me?" I said, numb. "She tried," he said. "It didn't work. But I thought you deserved to know. You may have built your career quietly, but not everyone is comfortable with the woman you've become." After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. Not angry, not even surprised. Just clear. Vanessa hadn't just erased me from the family narrative. She tried to erase me from my profession. And still, I was here. 3 weeks later, I stood before the judicial panel, answered their questions, and took my oath. No one from my family attended. No press release ran, just a single note, handwritten and slipped under my door the next morning. From Judge Marbury. 3 words. Make them notice. And the courtroom was smaller than I imagined for a seat with so much weight. The bench was simple. The gavel worn, the chair didn't swivel. But when I sat in it for the first time, something inside me shifted. Not because of the power, not because of the title, because I'd earned every splinter in that wood. Words spread slowly at first. A whisper here, a headline buried in the second page of the legal journal. Claire Whitmore appointed youngest federal judge in district history. No one outside the circuit seemed to notice. My parents didn't call. My inbox remained silent. But in the halls of justice, people started watching. Clerks I'd once shared coffee with now stood when I entered. Defense attorneys recalibrated their tones. Prosecutors paused before assuming they'd win, just because the facts were on their side. Because Judge Whitmore didn't play favorites. She didn't play at all. I kept my chambers modest. A law degree, framed without flash. A single photo of me and Rachel, my cousin, my only family who came to the swearing in, tucked into the corner bookshelf. No nameplate on the desk, just the work. And the work came. Domestic violence, land disputes, civil fraud, cases no one wanted to touch because they were messy, political, or thankless. I took them all, and people noticed. I didn't chase attention, but I didn't hide anymore either. When reporters asked for comment, I gave it. When universities requested lectures, I showed up, briefcase in hand, robe over my arm, and slowly the narrative changed. Not at home, not yet, but in the only arena that ever mattered to me. I started seeing my name cited in legal briefs. As determined in Whitmore v. State, they'd write, like I'd become part of the language. Like I wasn't just temporary, I was precedent. Still, I said nothing at Thanksgiving. Still, I brought the wine. Still, my mother asked if I was still doing legal support. And I just smiled, because I had learned something vital. You don't need to be loud to be undeniable. And when the moment comes, you let your silence do the speaking. By my second year on the bench, I'd stopped introducing myself with hesitation. I'm Judge Whitmore, I'd say, extending a hand that no longer shook. The title no longer felt like armor. It felt like skin. Earned, not worn. Invitations trickled in. Panels, symposiums, guest lectures. I delivered a keynote at a national conference on judicial ethics, then quietly boarded a red-eye home and arrived in time to pour mimosas at Vanessa's birthday brunch. She didn't ask where I'd been. She never did. Our family had a way of keeping the narrative tidy. Claire was still the quiet one, the one who worked somewhere near the courthouse. Vanessa was the success story. Vanessa was the name people dropped at dinner parties. Once, Uncle Ted leaned across the Thanksgiving table and said, "It's okay if your job isn't flashy, Claire. Honest admin work builds character." Rachel choked on her wine. I smiled and nodded, just like always. But something inside me had shifted. Not bitterness, not anger, just distance. A kind of emotional quarantine I'd built around myself over the years, brick by brick. The kind that keeps your voice steady when the room forgets to include you in the toast. Then came the article. Front page of the District Legal Observer. The Quiet Storm. How Judge Claire Whitmore is redefining the bench. It was elegant, thoughtful, fair. It chronicled my rise from clerk to prosecutor to judge. They quoted attorneys I respected. They mentioned my record. 98% of my rulings upheld on appeal. They even referenced my ability to balance empathy with rigor. Rachel called that night, breathless. "You've arrived," she said. I shrugged, just doing my job. But later, alone in my apartment, I read the article again. Not because I needed validation, but because for once the world saw me as I truly was, and I wanted to remember what that felt like before it was challenged again, because part of me sensed something was coming. Not a ruling, not a case, something personal, something messy. And it would all begin, I later realized, with a white tent, string lights, and a banner that read, "Congratulations, Vanessa and Ethan. A week after the article ran, Judge Marbury called. Not his clerk, not his assistant, him. "Claire," he said without preamble, "I thought you should know. There's more to your sister's attempt to derail your nomination than I originally told you." I was at my office, standing by the window, watching the late autumn wind shake the trees bare. "I thought we'd covered that," I said. He sighed. "We only covered what was provable, what's admissible. But I've been cleaning out my files and, well, let's just say some conversations I didn't document formally came back to mind." Silence. "I didn't want to taint your perspective, but Vanessa didn't just cast doubt on your integrity. She tried to trade favors." I turned from the window. "What kind of favors?" "She hinted at campaign donations, sponsorships for court outreach initiatives, media exposure for judicial transparency. All subtle, nothing explicit. But the implication was clear. If I chose someone else, those opportunities would be easier to arrange." My chest tightened. "She tried to bribe you," I said. "She tried to manipulate the selection process, yes." "And you didn't report it?" "I handled it the way old judges do, with silence and a locked drawer." I didn't respond. My mouth had gone dry. "Claire," he added gently, "you weren't just the better candidate. You were the right one, and I don't regret my choice for a second. But I thought, you deserve the whole truth before whatever comes next. He didn't say it, but he knew. Somewhere in the marrow of this city, the tremor had already begun. Vanessa had built a life of control, crafted like a PR campaign, refined and polished and bulletproof, and I'd spent years tiptoeing around it, playing small to keep her spotlight undisturbed. But truth has a strange way of resurfacing. And if Vanessa thought she'd buried mine, she was about to learn, judges don't stay quiet forever. The invitation arrived on thick cream cardstock, engraved with gold lettering and sealed with a wax V&E. Vanessa and Ethan, the perfect couple, the perfect event. The envelope sat unopened on my counter for 3 days before I RSVP'd, not because I didn't plan to go, because I needed time to build the version of me that could walk into that backyard without shrinking. The day arrived sunny and brittle, late spring in that strange moment between warmth and wind. I wore a navy dress, simple, structured, professional. No heels, no makeup beyond red lipstick, just enough to look intentional. The Whitmore house had been transformed. White tents billowed like sails across the lawn, Edison bulbs strung through trees, personalized cocktail napkins with Vanessa and Ethan's initials. Classical music floated through hidden speakers. And at the entrance, a banner 3 feet wide. "Congratulations, Vanessa and Ethan." I walked through like a guest. Not a sister. No one greeted me at the gate. No one asked where I'd been. My mother saw me and gestured toward the kitchen. "Claire, can you help with the drink station? Vanessa wants everything perfect when Ethan's parents arrive." Of course she did. Vanessa wasn't just managing a party. She was orchestrating an audience. Every detail was staged. Every table curated, every flower symmetrical. By 6 o'clock, the guests were settled and sipping. My parents flitted from group to group, glowing with social currency. Vanessa emerged last, radiant in an ivory dress that hugged her like a press release. She waved, beamed, floated across the patio like royalty. And then came Ethan. Tailored, tanned, magnetic in that effortless way certain men have when they know they're admired. He shook hands, laughed on cue, kissed Vanessa's cheek at exactly the right angle for a photographer I hadn't seen lurking by the hydrangeas. They worked the crowd together. Power couple perfection. My father said something about their future kids having PR and legal brilliance baked in. I stood by the drink station refilling ice until Rachel appeared at my side. "He doesn't recognize you, does he?" I didn't answer. Just watched Ethan across the lawn, brow slightly furrowed as he scanned the guests. "Not yet," I said, because that's the thing about masks. Eventually, someone always forgets who's behind them. And tonight, the cracks were coming. Dinner was served on the patio under soft lighting. Long tables, white linens, candlelight flickering in glass votives. The air buzzed with polite laughter and curated playlists. Vanessa had assigned seating, of course, and I found myself at the far end, next to Rachel and a cousin I barely knew. Vanessa and Ethan sat front and center, backlit by fairy lights, framed like a wedding magazine spread. Halfway through the salmon course, Vanessa rose with a glass in hand. "Before dessert," she said, "I just want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate this incredible next chapter with Ethan and me." Murmurs of agreement, light applause. She smiled wider. "And to our family, especially Claire, who works so hard behind the scenes." She turned slightly, gaze sweeping toward me. "Claire works at the courthouse," she added, voice light, "probably even files Ethan's paperwork." Laughter rippled through the table like champagne fizz. I didn't blink. Rachel stiffened beside me, but Ethan turned. His smile faltered, brow furrowed. He looked at me, really looked, like he was trying to place a half-remembered dream. "Claire Whitmore?" he asked, voice uncertain. "From County Courthouse?" The table quieted. "Yes," I said evenly. His eyes narrowed. "Wait, Judge Whitmore?" Silence snapped across the patio like a whip. Forks paused mid-air. Glasses stopped halfway to lips. Even the music seemed to dim. "You're a judge?" Ethan asked again, louder now, tone edged with disbelief. "As in, you presided over the Bradford Pharmaceuticals case?" I met his gaze. "Yes," I said simply. The word landed like a gavel. Dead silence. Vanessa's face went pale. Her wine glass trembled. "You're joking," she laughed, too loudly, too quickly. "She's not. She can't be." "She is," Ethan said, not taking his eyes off me. "She was the one who ruled against my client. I remember her." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, the entire illusion shattered. The quiet little sister wasn't so little. The admin wasn't so administrative. And Vanessa had built an entire narrative on the foundation of my supposed smallness. And it had just crumbled. In front of a crowd she'd handpicked to adore her. The silence shattered all at once. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan asked Vanessa, his voice quiet, but sharp, the way a blade is quiet before it cuts. Vanessa blinked. "Yes, and like someone had slapped her awake. I didn't know it was that case," she stammered. "I didn't connect it." "That case made national news," he said, incredulous. "And you never mentioned your sister was the presiding judge?" "I said she worked at the courthouse," she snapped. "What else was I supposed to say?" "The truth," he said coldly. "You could have said the truth." My parents sat frozen, my mother's hand still gripping her wine glass, my father staring at his plate like it might offer an escape. Rachel leaned toward me. "Claire, did you know she'd lied to him?" I shook my head. I thought he didn't remember me, which until tonight I had hoped, because the Bradford case wasn't just any case. It had been explosive. Ethan's firm had defended a company accused of covering up harmful side effects for a pediatric drug. He wasn't the lead attorney, but he had delivered one of the more damning cross-examinations. I remembered his tone in court, smug, dismissive. He hadn't recognized me because back then I wore a robe and didn't speak unless necessary. Now the robe was gone, but the judgment remained. Vanessa turned to Ethan, voice pitching upward, desperate. "You have no idea how hard it's been trying to keep the peace in this family. Claire always makes everything about herself." "I didn't say a word tonight," I said, calm, steady, controlled. "Not until your fiancé asked me a direct question." "You let us believe," she started. "No," I cut in. "You let yourself believe. You shaped a version of me that kept you comfortable, and when I didn't challenge it, you took that as permission." Ethan looked between us. "And all this time, you let me speak about the case, about how overly aggressive the judge was. You let me trash your sister, without once stopping me." Vanessa's mouth opened, closed. Then she turned on me, eyes burning. "This is my engagement party," she hissed, "and once again you found a way to hijack it." I didn't hijack anything, I replied. I've spent a decade staying small so you could feel big. All I did tonight was exist, and you couldn't handle that. The words dropped like stones into water, rippling through everyone present. For the first time all evening, the attention wasn't choreographed. It was real, and it was all crashing down. The party didn't end with a bang. It ended with a scrape. The sound of Vanessa's chair dragging against the stone patio as she stood, trembling with rage. Her heel caught in the hem of her gown, but she didn't stumble. She stormed off, back straight, fury wrapped around her like a second skin. Ethan hesitated for a beat, then followed her without a word. The rest of us sat in the vacuum left behind, champagne warm, dinner cold, silence thick with disbelief. No one dared speak. Rachel finally broke the silence. "Well, so well," she said, lifting her glass. "Here's to truth bombs." My father cleared his throat, as if preparing to say something wise, but only managed, You're really a judge?" I turned to him, slowly. "For almost 3 years." He blinked. "But your mother said..." "I clerked. Then I prosecuted, then I got appointed. No one ever asked what came next." My mother looked stricken, like someone had swapped her daughter mid-meal. "I thought you were happy being behind the scenes." "I was never behind the scenes," I said quietly. "You just never looked at the stage." The words hung in the air, soft but heavy. Uncle Ted muttered something about honest work again, but no one was listening. The narrative had cracked, and once cracks form, light gets in, whether you want it to or not. Someone finally turned the music off. The evening ended not with applause, not with tears, but with confusion. Guests gathering their coats, mumbling goodbyes, avoiding eye contact. The picture-perfect engagement party dissolving into fragments no PR campaign could salvage. At home, I set my heels by the door and dropped my clutch on the counter. The silence of my apartment wrapped around me like an old sweater, safe, honest. Until the knock came. It was just after midnight. I opened the door to find Ethan standing there. No jacket, shirt collar, unbuttoned, eyes hollow. "She didn't know I was coming," he said. I didn't invite him in. I didn't shut the door either. He leaned against the frame, hands in pockets. "She's furious. Says I embarrassed her. Says you orchestrated the whole thing." I raised an eyebrow. "By existing?" "I didn't know who you were until tonight," he said. "And now I can't stop thinking about everything she kept from me." A long silence passed between us. "Claire," he said, softer, "you were extraordinary in court. You are now, and I don't think I've ever felt so ashamed for not seeing it." I didn't respond, because forgiveness isn't handed out at the door. It's earned in the quiet aftermath. 3 days passed. No texts, no calls. Then, on a rainy Thursday morning, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Vanessa. No makeup, hair pulled back, eyes swollen like she hadn't slept in days. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, like she wasn't sure the floor would hold her. We sat on the couch, the silence thick and ancient, stretching between us like a fault line. For once, she didn't posture. She didn't launch into excuses. She just stared at her hands. "I didn't recognize the version of you at that table," she finally said. "You were unshakable." "I was always that version," I replied. She nodded, slowly. "I didn't want to believe it." "Why?" A long pause. Then she whispered, "Because I was supposed to be the successful one." The honesty landed harder than any insult ever could. "I spent my whole life being the best," she continued. "Straight A's, lead roles, perfect outfits. I thought if I kept performing, they'd never stop clapping." I said nothing. "And then you started rising, quietly, without needing anyone's permission, and it scared the hell out of me." I exhaled. "You tried to sabotage my nomination." She didn't deny it. "I panicked," she said. "You weren't supposed to be ahead of me. I thought if I could slow you down, I could catch up. I wasn't trying to destroy you. Her voice cracked. "I admired you." That was the twist I didn't see coming. She didn't hate me. She envied the version of me that didn't require applause to matter. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in years, I saw not the villain in my story, but a woman lost in a performance so long running, she no longer knew where the costume ended and her skin began. "I don't need your approval," I said quietly, "but I'd accept your respect." She nodded tearfully. "I'm proud of you, Claire. I always have been. Maybe that's what scared me the most." It wasn't a fix, but it was a start. 3 months later, we weren't best friends, but we were better. Vanessa started therapy. Real therapy, not a PR rebrand disguised as self-care. She canceled the wedding, postponed everything, not out of drama, but reflection. Ethan moved out quietly, with a handshake and a thank you he didn't need to say twice. My parents began to listen. The next time my mom introduced me, she didn't say, "Claire works at the courthouse." She said, "My daughter's a judge." She almost choked on the word, but it made it out. That was enough. Rachel and I celebrated by opening the good wine. I stopped minimizing myself. At work, at home, in rooms that once asked me to shrink, I stood taller, not louder, just clearer, and people noticed. Vanessa showed up at my chambers once. No cameras, no agenda, just a sister, standing awkwardly in a place she'd once pretended didn't exist. "This is impressive," she said. "I know," I replied. We smiled. It was awkward, but it was real. At the next family gathering, she asked me to carve the turkey. A small gesture, but for the first time, her spotlight made room for someone else. And I took it, not because I needed the attention, but because I'd spent too long hiding in shadows I never asked for. The night ended with laughter and leftovers and no jabs about filing paperwork. And as I stood by the sink, elbow deep in soap and dishes, my grandmother shuffled over, patted my hand, and said, "I always knew you were something special, dear." I believed her, because now, so did I.